Hello, I'm Dave Hendon from the Snooker Scene podcast.
And I'm Nick Metcalfe from the Talking Snooker podcast.
And I'm Phil Haigh, also from the Talking Snooker podcast.
I won't make the old blockbusters joke again, but it's 2v1. But this is it's a summer special, bringing together. I don't like to say the two leading podcasts in snooker, but two of the leading. And actually, it is quite summery as I look out the window here in Birmingham. It's quite sunny. It's quite warm. How special it is remains to be seen. But anyway, we thought we'd get together. For no particular reason, let's be honest. But I guess the season is kind of starting now. We've had the Championship League, like General Patton laying down his gun. I'm wondering what to do with my time now it's over. But the Shanghai Masters, and it's a big month actually, isn't it? We've got Shanghai, we've got Saudi, we've got Wuhan before the end of August. So here we are. There's no real agenda, but we're going to have a chat for the next 90 minutes. And, well, how are you both?
Very good, yeah. Terrific, Dave. Just been reflecting a little bit before we came on air, weren't we, about the Championship League, and saying we thought for a while there'd be, potential of a first-time winner, lots of players that hadn't done it before, but then, of course, a redoubtable character in Stephen Maguire. And 21 years since his first ranking tournament victory. And this is a bit of an aside, and it sounds like I'm trying to take it away, but I've noticed it's still now 12 years since he won the tournament with a crowd, because the 2020 COVID one was behind closed doors, and obviously this one was too. So it's funny, Stephen, he's such a good player, isn't he? And he shows it again in sort of bursts. I don't really know why he doesn't do it more often. It could be a case of doesn't always knuckle down enough, but when he's on it, boy, he's just a delight to watch, and a very good first winner of the season. I think, Phil, 5 years since his last one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he looked really good, didn't he? Whenever I saw him, he played on I think it was the very first day, and he sort of breezed through that group. And it's funny because the players are so separated from where they play sometimes. Like, you forget how good he was in the last round, but he did look good all the way through. And it was interesting to hear World Snooker put that tweet out where they asked a few players about who they thought was going to be their surprise performer, and Higgins, he's obviously very biased, but he did say Maguire, but crucially, he said it was because he's been practicing hard 4 or 5 hours a day all summer, and I don't think everyone does that. And it showed. He looked great when all his matches, apart from I think he just drew one. It takes some doing over those short formats. I know O'Connor was similarly won everything until the final. He looked great as well. But yeah, fair play, putting in the hours. He obviously looked decent again in the second half last season, getting to the Welsh final. And then I think he had back trouble, didn't he, which cost him a bit after that. But hopefully that's all behind him. And yeah, I was saying just before we came on, I mean, he's a great character just to have competing again. He's been in the wilderness a bit, but
Yeah.
I think tournaments are better with a pumped up, on form Stephen Maguire knocking around. I'd like to have him there.
Yeah, I mean the penultimate day because Ricky Walden came into practice because he was on the last day and Stephen was playing. And he just looked at the TV and he just said he's a proper player, isn't he? And I kind of everyone knew what he meant by that. But it's interesting because I had to interview him twice and I had to do the arena interview at the end. And Hazel Irvine is sleeping soundly. That's all I'll say about that. But
not at all. You're very good at them. That's silly.
It's quite interesting though that he's one of those guys, and there's quite a few of them actually. If you try and pay him a compliment, he won't have it. And that is very much his background in a sort of working class snooker club environment where you're not allowed to get above yourself. So you're not allowed to be big headed. If you are, someone will cut you down. And so even if you try and, like I made a comment when he qualified for the final group that he had, there's no reason why he shouldn't win it because he, looking around, had won probably more tournaments than anyone else who were going to be there. And he straight away said, I haven't won that many. And I said, no, but you've won more than the others. And then even like afterwards, you're trying to, well, he tried to blame me actually for it being a ranking event, which I didn't really understand. It had nothing to do. He said, "Oh, you people make it." I had nothing to do with it, but anyway. But I think actually it's quite refreshing in this world of sort of, people are quite with social media and all the rest of it, quite keen to sort of big themselves up. He's the complete opposite. Now maybe you can take that too far. Maybe I don't know, but there's quite a few players like that who, and it is their background, the old school. You cannot in a snooker club be above yourself. He's never kind of lost that, and he's quite admirable in some ways. I think he's old school, which I quite like.
Yeah, I think even like the great like Higgins and Williams would fall into that category as well. I think quite hard to, especially Jordan, quite hard to sort of compliment. He won't really accept it. Like if you met him in any circumstance and didn't know what he'd achieved in this sport, you wouldn't come away from the conversation knowing. I don't think he would keep his light firmly under the bushel.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And even Ronnie a bit. Even Ronnie at times. Yeah, but Higgins is sort of, is at times sort of ridiculous. It's like, you seem to be playing well at the moment, John. Oh, I'm not sure about that. Well, I mean, you're in the contention to win things. Well, that's for others. I don't know. That's for others to say. It's like, well, you are John Higgins.
Yes.
Anyway,
well, the Champions League is over. I think, Nick, like John Craven, you might be doing a roundup, but I just wanted to, because I was there, obviously, for almost all of it. And it's a long event. Nobody disputes that. But we were just chatting before we started. It is genuinely, I think, for the younger players, the new players, really good. Ben Mertens, we saw, actually finished second in his final group. Now, that's got to give him so much confidence, going forward. And also, it's just a chance to see these guys because, so many events, they have to pre-qualify. And, okay, there is streaming, but it's all a bit low-key. Or even if they qualify for, say, an event in China, table 7, you're sort of in danger of blowing up your laptop trying to find a streaming, good channel to watch it on. So actually, everybody got the same chance. You're on one of 2 stream tables, 3 matches, and obviously if you get through, another 3. And it was quite good, I think, to see, those guys. It's a long event, but, it sort of eased us into the season. And interesting that, again, when it came down to the crunch, one of the experienced players won it, like last year with Ali Carter, who beat Jackson Page. He was trying to win his first event. We had Luca, we had Sean Murphy. Actually, Karen Wilson won the first of the ranking event versions. So even though it seems wide open for a new player to come through, actually, almost all of them. It's only Dave Gilbert, who'd been around a long time anyway, been in lots of finals. He's the only one who for whom it was his first ranking title.
Yeah. I sort of clock that. I mean, we say that about quite a lot of tournaments, don't we? Even the sort of more regular ranking tournaments. We're definitely going to get some shock semis and finalists this time, and then it's sort of Robertson and Selby. That's the way it goes. We're blessed with a lot of good players. I'll say this on another broadcast I was doing the other day. We don't sell that enough sometimes. How many players we have in contention to win these things? That's a brilliant underrated thing, I think. You do know John Craven doesn't do Newsround anymore, don't you, Dave?
Really? Oh no.
He's finished now.
Roger Finn still? Does he still step in? I think there's one for the teenagers. Roger Finn.
Bloody hell! Yeah, that's going back a few years for sure. Well, when I said I was going to do a quick roundup, I got a sort of tumbleweed response from you two back, which presumably means you're not delighted by that. But I did promise 90 seconds tops, so That's probably a lie. But here we go. We were last on air last Thursday, Phil. Last day of the opening stage. Zhu Ce and Dylan Emery won the groups that day. Fan Zhengzi made the first 147 of the season. Stage 2 then, last Friday, Stephen Maguire and Joe O'Connor, the eventual finalists, won their groups. On to last Saturday, it was Zhu Ce and Pang Jung-soo who topped their respective groups, as did Ricky Walden and Matthew Selt on Monday. Stuart Bingham bottom of the Selt group, bit of a surprise there. On Tuesday, it was Tom Ford and Ben Mertens topping their group. The Mertens group, heavens above, all equal, level on wins, losses, defeats, frame average, everything. Mertens making the highest break, though, of 1-1-1, so he goes through. Sam Craigie third in that group, Phil, gives us a chance to say thanks to Sam. He was fabulous value with us on here last week. Final day on Wednesday then, Joe O'Connor topped one of the groups with 3 wins from 3 matches, 9 points, ahead of Ricky Walden with 4 points, Tom Ford with 2 and Zhu Ce with 1. And the other group, Stephen Maguire topped it with 6 points, ahead of Ben Mertens with 4, Pang Jung-soo with 4 and Matt Selt with 2. And then the final, of course, as we said, Stephen Maguire 3, Joe O'Connor 1. How did I do?
Sounded like 90 seconds to me, or close enough.
That's it. Championship League's done. That is the end, as the Prime Minister once said, Formula One.
Yes, yes. No, but all I'll say, one thing I will say, and this is like genuine, is we get looked after better at that event than probably any other. The Matchroom sort of put the money up, and then the Mattioli staff could not do enough for you. Put it this way, I mean, this is true, I lost 1.5 stone after the World Championship just through walking, being healthy, not being in the snooker environment. You get there, they've got the fridge of doom, right? They've got the fridge, it's packed with cheesecakes and stuff. This is true, right? One morning, Phil Yates,
fridge of doom.
Phil Yates,
I'm sure Phil Yates never opens that fridge, though.
Well, 11 o'clock one morning, he said, I've not had breakfast, right? He walked in, he had a packet of crisps and a lemon meringue pie. It's not really a nutritional meal, but anyway. But Chris Wakelin said to me, who was sat between sessions. He said to me, what's the Championship League do for your diet? And I pointed out it was 4:00 and I was eating lemon drizzle cake. So that kind of answers that. But I wasn't forced into eating it.
What was the Phil Yates line, Phil Haigh, that he put up? Something like, he hasn't missed a meal since Mead was on the...
He was making me laugh a lot during the Championship League. It must be fun, actually. One more point on that for you guys. Get to mix it up so much with the players coming in the Championship, in the commentary box. Some of them were great. I was listening to Wakeland the other day. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, like I said on my podcast, like most of them have already been knocked out, so there isn't really a sort of conflict of interest as such. But Chris, very thoughtful. It's interesting, like he actually, because he'd sort of been at home, I think, with his daughter, a lot, and he's actually been watching it all, so he knew everything that had gone on and was across it all. You get to sort of the commentary is a reflection of their personalities, so some will talk more than others, but they've all got something to say about a game they've been playing all their lives, and yeah, I mean, it wouldn't work in every event, I don't think, and obviously, we have discovered Stephen Hallworth through this, who's gone on to be very lots of work elsewhere, and I think a lot of people agree is just a really good voice of the game, a young voice of the game, and back on tour. So he's maybe helped him as well in that regard. So yeah, it's we've got a big voice, I'm sure, for many years from it.
Mm-hmm. I popped down for one day, and it's great for chatting to people, and it's interesting to see the sort of environment, because it's different from most events. Obviously, you're hanging around to go and play again after you've played, and it's not how you imagine a lot of tournaments where people are in the dressing room getting themselves psyched up, ready to go to battle. They're all just sat in the players' lounge, chatting, eating some crisps, playing darts, and then someone comes in and goes, "Oh, you're on now," and they'll just wander out together. So it's pretty relaxed. But there was some great stuff, wasn't there? There were some great breaks. Like I said, the young players, even the ones who didn't get through, seeing like Sabashik play, he got a draw against Fan, I think. That young Chinese player that drew with Stevens, he was only 16, Lan Yao. Just little bits like that. It's just nice to see him. So, yeah, enjoyed it.
Well, that's the Championship League. As I say, we literally haven't really got an agenda. But as it's summer, I thought we would sort of try and shift it onto that terrain. Snooker's not traditionally a summer sport, obviously, in the UK. But actually, you look back, there's been loads of snooker played in the summer. When the class of 92 turned pro in 92, because there were so many professionals, there's like 600 professionals, they had to start playing all the qualifying in June. So Ronnie in particular, because he won so many matches, he was at that Norbreck in Blackpool for 3 months. And it's interesting. I mean, who had 15 minutes in, I'm going to plug my book on the bingo card, but they all said, the three of them, Mark and John as well, in Pots of Gold, coming out in September. And by the way, I should say this before I forget, because people have genuinely asked me. Brian McGovern, who regularly corresponds, who's visually impaired, I have been asked to do an audiobook. So
nice.
That's nice.
Yeah, so that will be coming out soon. I will be reading it myself. I don't know whether that puts people off or not, but anyway, I will be recording that. But anyway, they all said they noticed, because they were all like 17, 18. And they noticed like the slightly older players in the early 20s were basically treating it as a stag do. They turned professional, but it was Blackpool and they were all out on the beers. It was summer, and the three of them didn't do that. Ronnie spent time running on the beach between matches. Mark was just kind of with his friends. John, I think, was with his dad, so he was kind of looked after. So that's actually really important that they didn't sort of drift into that culture. But that's an example of snooker in the summer. And now, of course, we're kind of used to it. I mean, obviously, Shanghai is in China; it's not in the UK, but we're kind of used to snooker starting a bit earlier. But one of the most significant meetings, people make all this fuss about Lennon meeting McCartney at that church fete, I think it was that time. But one of the most significant meetings in snooker history came in the summer. This is true. Barry Hearn and Steve Davis, because, again, it's in Pots of Gold. But Barry ran a chain of snooker clubs, the Lucania chain. And obviously in the summer, fewer people went in because the weather was nice. So he thought, we need to up the profits. What should we do? And he organised a big tournament. It's called the Lucania National, for quite big prize money in those days. And he made it a rule that you had to play twice a week in one of his clubs. Okay, so obviously that forced people to come in and pay for the light and all the rest of it. And Steve Davis travelled over to, I think it was the club in Romford, with his dad. And someone said to him, this guy looks really good. He's a young guy. You want to come and look at him? And, between them, they conquered the 80s. So summer snooker actually has quite an interesting sort of, historical place. We think of it as a sport. The nights are drawing in. It's cold. It's late at night. There's David Vine, all that stuff. But actually, the summer seems tenuous, but stay with it. The summer has had its place in snooker history.
Plus, thanks to very sad circumstances, a famous World Championship recently, of course, in the summer, with perhaps the most exciting day ever at the Crucible. Mm. That semi-final day was extraordinary in high summer in August. So, yeah, I must admit, growing up, no, I never thought of it as much of a snooker season. It was more of a September thing, really. Similar to football, actually. I've never been a big fan of August football. I like it when it sort of gets a bit more, into the autumn. But no, we can't be like that anymore. There's too many, top events in the summer, and it's brilliant, really. And as you say, three big ones coming up. It's not like one or two. Three big ones coming up before August is done. Our cut will be runneth over, Phil. I'll be doing loads more John Cravens before this season is done.
Yeah, it's massive, isn't it? Saudi being right at the start of the season, it's just like, it's not the World Championship, but it is in prize money. Having that right at the start, it just changes everything. Obviously, sort of Judd winning it last year didn't feel like it did change everything because he's right at the top of everything anyway. But there's a chance for someone just to completely turn their whole life around, let alone just the season to come. So, yeah, it is massive. And I suppose some of that summer snooker that's happened in the past, it's not like now where you could watch, imagine if the Norbreck was now, you could watch it all somewhere. But it's a lovely sort of mythical quality about those days that you just hear tales from that place rather than there's obviously no footage or anything. But I quite like that because it just seems like another world from the past. And you do try and get some of those stag do kind of stories out of players sometimes, and they're a bit reticent to tell them a lot of the time. But I bet some stuff happened there though.
And Dave, you went there with Alan McManus, just to say, didn't you? Which you can hear on your back catalogue in recent times. Yes, and that was brilliant. Listen, found a random queue there. Don't know how long it had been there.
Yeah, it was a strange old decision we made, really, looking back. But yeah, we went there. It was like morning off during the Champion of Champions, so it was just down the road from Bolton. And I mean, to a generation of players, good and bad, if you say the Norbreck, that it will conjure, because they were there for so long, and people kind of went mad. I mean, there was a story about the officials. I mean, they were there longer than anybody. And there was a story about one day they just decided to shave off one of Mike Ganley's eyebrows, just because they were basically, it was like being in The Shining. They were just in this hotel and it was just...
Shining!
What should we do? Let's shave off Mike Ganley's eyebrow, But that's what it did to people. But I have a story, because when I was young, we never went on holiday abroad. I don't say that regretfully. We just didn't. We went on holiday in the UK because if you grow up in the West Midlands, the sea is something quite exotic. You don't see the sea. You're in an very urban environment, and the chance to go to the seaside was, thrilling. So we would always holiday in the UK, normally in Norfolk. But what we would do is we would sort of rent a cottage for a couple of weeks, but it would never be ready till mid-afternoon. We'd always leave early. This idea that it would take forever. It's like 3 hours we're there. So we get there sort of, mid-morning. What are you going to do? We would always go to Hunstanton where they had a snooker club. And it would be quite often, in your memory, it's always sunny, right? It's blazing hot. What we're going to do, we're at the seaside. Let's spend 4 hours indoors. And of course, in snooker clubs, obviously they have to shut the curtains. It's a weird kind of way to start a holiday, but I would always look forward to that as much as everything else about it. Yeah. And it was old school in those days. You could smoke. Obviously, I didn't, but you could smoke. People were drinking. You'd get the regulars. There was always a slight sort of frisson of trouble, but never actually any trouble. I mean, it's Hunstanton after all. But that was the way we start the holiday. And that's kind of always in my mind. Again, a summer sort of snooker memory. We go in there. And they kind of got, it were a few years, they got to know us. And I think it's actually no longer there like a lot of snooker clubs. But that always kind of, I was never interested in going to Spain. I'm sure they didn't have snooker tables in Spain in those days. Why would I want to go there,
When you said Hunstanton, the first thing that comes, and really the only thing that comes into my head is Hunstanton Spice Museum, which is just one line from Alan Partridge. And I know nothing else about it, really.
Lovely place, lovely part of the world. But that for some reason that when we agreed to do this Summer Special. It's a sort of place. I mean, Nick and I talked about Tom O'Connor, and again, apologies to anyone under the age of 50 who's listening, but they used to host sort of summer. What was it called? Summertime Special or something?
Well, I think it was Seaside Special. That was the problem with it. When we suggested it in the spring, and I think you did, it's a great idea. But then, yeah, I mean, I think even and I seem to get away with anything really. Even I sort of said, well, I don't think we can call it a Seaside Special really. You're in Birmingham, Phil's in Sheffield, I'm in Hackney. I mean,
as far away from the sea as you can get in the country.
It's trades descriptions time. I mean, I can be on Leon C and the Rattler in under an hour, to be fair, but that doesn't really, I mean, it's just not, it doesn't cut it. But yeah, Seaside Special, I put an old clip up actually of one from the 70s. And I mean, to say it's a wonderful time warp wouldn't be doing it justice. I mean, Keith Harris is on there, but young Keith Harris. There's another one for the teenagers. Roy Hard, the late great Roy Hard. And yeah, it was. They just do half an hour, 40 minutes of end of the pier entertainment, wouldn't they, Dave? You know, just sort of singing, bit of circus acts sometimes, jokes from Roy and the like. And yeah, we're quite a low rent version of that, I think you'd say. Very low.
Well, that was pretty low rent to start with. But anyway, you mentioned Keith Harris, and we'll get back to the key issues in snooker in a minute. But there's a story. I think he's passed away now, so which helps because he can't sue for the story I'm about to tell. But we talked about Blackpool, and it must have been during the snooker. I think he might have been the shooter, actually. So it would have been, a decade ago or so. But apparently some of them went out after, the day of the shootout to some local nightclub. And Keith Harris, he claimed, or certainly someone who looked like Keith Harris, was on the dance floor just on his own, just sort of shuffling around, looking quite sort of downbeat. Didn't even have Orville with him. He was just on his own. So I don't know where that gets us. But
Orville with him.
Yeah,
that's quite a sad tale, really, isn't it?
It's sort of maybe, because I suppose his era of showbiz had come to an end, because that era that the people Nick's described on that programme, very soon after that were kind of, they were out of fashion, weren't they? And they were grubbing around on sort of reality TV, trying to reinvent themselves.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a cautionary tale, isn't it? One day you're on Wogan, the next you're shuffling around a Blackpool nightclub on your own on the dance floor. Can happen to anyone.
It's not, if people have tuned in for sort of a preview of the Shanghai Masters, it's not quite what they're getting, but this is a summer special. I mean, the idea is to sort of loosen up a little bit.
I never saw Bob Carroll G's without Spit the dog. Every time I've seen Carroll G's, he's had Spit with him. I can't. So most of those guys, seriously, Roger de Courcy, who did Roger have with him? That's another one for the teenagers. Nookie Bear, of course, yeah. Sorry, we have to sort of move on a little bit from this. And we will, but yeah, Roger de Courcy and Nookie Bear, my goodness, that's that's definitely going back. But that's a lovely story there, Dave. And you have a habit of telling your stories romantically. I mean, just a little plug for Radio Snooker, of course. I think it may have been the first time on the air, on an audio sense, you revealed your first line. I'll talk about it quite a bit soon. I don't know the exact words, but for Dennis Taylor, it was a glimpse of colour in a black and white world. I don't know if that's exact, but that kind of thing. Because I had Dave Yates, the racing journalist, on there the other day. And he was talking, he's a little bit older than us, and he was talking about, snooker clubs. And I was saying, we want to move on from that reputation. And we deservedly have to a large extent. They are nicer places now. They're some of them are still a little bit, could improve, actually. But they're now, I go to the one in King's Crossfield, we go to the one in Tooting, lovely places, welcoming, the one in Manchester we went to, loads of them. But there's no use pretending that back in the day, not everyone was a den of iniquity, but at the same token, they weren't places where people of great virtue would fill the place either, were they, really? And you're right, a lot of it was sort of tales, what so-and-so might have done. And of course, for youngsters, it was thrilling. Especially if you a bit more the innocent side of life. You're in these places where it was a bit of a sort of thrill. This is decades ago, as I say, times have moved on. But yeah, they were funny places, and I loved your colour thing there, because a lot of people talk about the colours, especially going back. It was a less colourful world then, and the smoke, and again, without getting too romantic, but they were sort of places that you couldn't easily forget going into, eh?
I think. Like you say, there was a sort of suggestion that it was a little bit kind of, put it this way, a lot of people, again, for the book said the clubs they went in, particularly older players, if you ever wanted anything that was knocked off, someone could get it for you within about 10 minutes. There's always a character like that who could get a stereo or whatever, a record player. But then again, it was never it wasn't like it was being used for sort of serious, terrible things. It was just a slight undercurrent of dodginess. But I think, like you say, if you sort of come from a very kind of maybe straight-laced background, that's kind of quite exciting. And yeah, it's maybe romanticised too much. The problem we've got now, of course, is we just don't have enough of them. Every day you see in some local paper that a club's going to be turned into flats or something, or offices. And that's something that, I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know whether it's time to sort of move on from the snooker club era and try and incorporate snooker into other leisure facilities, so that it's more of a sort of general thing, and snooker's one of the things you do. I don't know, but it's a concern because Joe O'Connor, who's in the Championship League final, he's one of only 3 British players under 30 in the top 64. There's only 2 others, there's Jackson Page and Stan Moody in the top 64. Now, there used to be 20 years ago there were 7 in the top 16, so there is clearly an issue. There are still some really good young players. We saw them. Liam Davis, Dylan Emery, I think, is a really good player. And hopefully they will, have really successful careers. But, it's become more of a sort of trickle than a rush of young players. We talk about that class of 92. They weren't the only players who were talented in those days. Not all of them made it, obviously. So the snooker club, and that story I told about Hunstanton, that club isn't there now. If I was that age now and we went on holiday there, we'd have to do something else for 3 hours because that club wouldn't be there.
Yeah, I've said it a load of times, I think, but I mean, I live in Sheffield, so like the home of snooker, but there's very few clubs to go to. There's the academies, obviously, but that's just a whole different kettle of fish, really. There's basically just one good club, maybe 2, and then it's 10 quid an hour. And how do kids get involved and get better when it's going to cost them 60 quid a day to do the amount of practice that you need to become good? It's very hard to see. And you speak to some of the young players now, and it's like the whole family has to sort of change their life to focus on getting them good at snooker. So, it can pay off if you get to the top, but it's a huge sacrifice from not just them, which you would expect to be a top professional sports person, but, their parents, their brothers and sisters, everything about their lives needs to be focused on, them gambling up being being a top snooker player. So it is tough. Certainly. Well, the situation in China, whether it's government funded and they can do it a bit with less sort of strain on that side of things, is gonna, it's gonna see more and more Chinese players come through. But I don't know how to fix it. Not an easy one.
Well, this is the question. I think the Crucible, obviously, that is going to be kind of resolve that issue about whether it'll stay there or not, the World Championship, by the end of the year. And one thing that keeps coming up is the idea of government funding around the World Championship, but can that more widely filter down into the sport, not just about helping to keep the World Championship in Britain, but the sort of the legacy of that? Can that money be used to get something going? It'd be nice to think it could. I mean, snooker's never gets any funding. It's not an Olympic sport. It's not a fashionable sport in that way. But maybe this is an opportunity, and Barry keeps mentioning it, which tells you it must be being discussed. Maybe this is an opportunity to get some funding that actually will then, can help these young players who show promise.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and just to preview, we have got a few rash predictions later. Well, a couple in my case. I don't know how many you guys have got. And one of mine links to the Crucible. That's all. Bit of a preview for later. One of mine links to the Crucible. Dave, I love those early memories. I did actually go on a family holiday once to Spain when I was 14, but like you, otherwise it would have been domestic. And I really remember Butlins. I loved the snooker sort of room and hall there. That always comes to mind. But actually, most of my memories, I was thinking going back when I was younger, would have been pool table. I was always round the pool table at various sort of holiday centres or, caravan parks. That would have been the thing. But also, I did want to remember that a couple of things. And I'm not sure it quite counts in the same way when you sort of make snooker happen. I think in our podcast years, Phil, I've sort of ramped up a sort of snooker on my travel sideline. And if you remember, I went to a club in Reykjavik, in the capital of Iceland, and spoke to Alan Trigg, which you can hear on my SoundCloud account, actually. But I liked it because one very niche thing, Christian Helgeson, who you remember, Dave, once played at the Crucible. I just missed him in the club I went to. Someone said, "Oh, you just missed him. He was here a while ago having a pizza." I thought, no, I like that. That's a very niche topic. Just missing people who were just on the premises having a pizza. Very good, very good. And also bumping into snooker people. Now, a few years ago, not a player, but a friend of ours and a great voice of the game, one of my best friends actually in snooker, really, Gary Moss. In Menorca, I heard a Nick, and it was great. I'm not going to beat around the bush. You know, we go away to get away from home, don't we? So it can sometimes be a bit disconcerting. It's happened a few times in my life, and you're like, oh my God, someone from home. That really throws me. But Gary, as we know, is such a great bloke, and it was actually only a few weeks after Bonnie and won his 7th. So it's just a great thing to sort of natter away about that in the sunshine in Menorca. So I don't know if you guys have ever actually bumped into an actual snooker person on holiday, but I thought that was a nice little niche one.
I don't think I have on holiday. Just racking my brains. I don't think so, Dave.
No, mercifully not. No. But you mentioned Christian Helgerson there, and Iceland is quite an interesting snooker background. But they did have a Matchroom League match in Reykjavik. I think Neil Foltz played there against Steve Davis. I think that's right. There was I can't remember his name now, but there was an Icelandic player who, before she became famous, was the boyfriend of Mel B from the Spice Girls. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember his
name.
name.
I read about that recently for some reason, down some Wikipedia rabbit hole, most likely.
There was another one, Brynmar Valdemarson. He had a wooden leg. You know, it was very challenging, obviously, to play. But he beat John Spencer in the World Masters in 1991, you know, because that was a big international event. He was invited in. And, of course, Christian Helgerson, he qualified for the Crucible. He's the most enigmatic man. We interviewed him, I remember it. And would say very little. He could speak English, but just didn't really want to say anything. And Phil Yates is involved in this story again. So the BBC, before he played, they got wind that he was sort of enigmatic. So if you've seen the film All the President's Men, okay, there's a character in that called Deep Throat, and he's the sort of the source. He's giving confidential information in a car park, right? So they decided to sort of spoof that. So they had Phil dressed in a sort of hat and a coat, and they went to this car park in Sheffield to film it. And the idea was you're going to side look to him. He was going to give you information about Christian Helgerson, right? Nobody knew anything about it, but Phil was going to give you information, right? Now, I'll say two things. He's not a trained actor. That's the first thing. And the second thing is because it had to be dark, they had to do it late at night, okay? And obviously, you know, there are various people in city centres who like a drink, and, you know, when they see people filming for the television, they're going to heckle. So basically, the whole thing was a shambles. I think it was still broadcast, having said that. But yeah, that was Phil's big acting chance as a man, quite niche, as a man supplying information on Christian Helgerson.
I love the way you said that this is true of the Mel B story. I think the listeners are kind of presuming that most of our stories are true, Dave. That's the point.
Yeah. There was another snooker player, not from Iceland, who was the boyfriend of Heather Mills, the former Mrs. Paul McCartney.
Oh wow!
It's a short list, I think, but anyway, yeah.
It's impressive, yeah.
Dated famous people, but yeah. Sorry, I don't know how we got onto that. Anyway,
I don't think it matters. We did sort of suggest sort of snooker related holiday things. So mine is actually much more recent than from growing up. Last weekend, I went to somewhere with a very niche snooker connection, and I don't know if I could say anything to make you guess it, but it was the other Barnsley that Neil Robertson accidentally went to miss his World Open qualifier.
Where is that? Because we've heard various Gloucestershire, he said. But
yeah, it's a delightful little Cotswolds village. And, you know, half my family is from the other Barnsley, so I feel comfortable in saying this. A delightful little Cotswold village, Barnsley ain't. It could not be more different from the Barnsley he should have been going to. And also, it's absolutely miles away. I think it was a 3-hour drive from Sheffield. So I don't know how far he got towards the Barnsley he was going to before he realised, but it's like completely the other direction. He must have seen a few signs to the north that he was not following before he realised he was going to a tiny little village. It was literally just a pub and a few houses there. But lovely place. Would recommend it, but struggle to realise how he got it confused.
Well, indeed. I mean, the thing about sort of snooker holidays is interesting because actually it's increasingly becoming a way that players discover the game. Like Luca Brissell, he was on holiday and he saw a pool table, and him and his dad, I think it was, and they just They didn't even know how to play. He initially held the cue the wrong way round. He was trying to hit it with the wrong end of the cue because he'd never seen cue sport before. But something about it, got him. Although, of course, these days I think holidays are more interesting to him than actually actually playing. But the sort of absence of snooker clubs, maybe actually going on holiday and in Spain or wherever and seeing a pool table. You hear a lot now that people, oh yeah, I saw. That's how I started. That's become a kind of new way of starting to play.
I think it's just a numbers game, isn't it? You need people just to have a go once because the number of pros you speak to, and literally the first time they play, you could tell they're going to be good. Because I was speaking to Anthony Hamilton when he retired, and going back to the first time he ever saw a snooker table, ever like picked up a cue, he'd made 24, and he'd literally never touched a cue before. No, like I know we've not played, Dave, but I know me and Nick would be thrilled with a 24, and we've played a reasonable amount of snooker over our lives.
Yeah.
Just can't do it. But these guys, like, if they're going to be good, they just need to have just had one go, and then you realise, and then you caught, and then you got the bug, and you go again. But we just need to get the numbers in to at least have a go at it to find those guys.
What you never hear is from those guys, oh, this table is massive. I still think that. In fact, I said this on the air before, Phil. I'm not just hamming it up. There will be one occasion, I think, when we play the Tony Mio, when I think I'll say it out loud. So that's miles away. When the white's at one end, it's not a regular long pot. It will be in fairness to me, it will be when the white's really tight and then the other ball's fairly tight on the other end. I'm like, that is just miles away. This should be 2/3 of the size. How can they make... And that's what you never hear them say. But for us sort of, very, very ordinary characters, trying to have a game, the size of it, even at my age, I think this is too big. Sorry, that's not the sort of thing a snooker podcast host maybe should say, but honestly, the best policy, Dave Hendon.
No, it's true. I think, like most people, the traditional way of starting to play is on a small table. Obviously, you can fit in your garage or your front room or whatever. And there is something quite forbidding about, the full size snooker table. Obviously, if you're a kid, you're small anyway, so it seems bigger maybe than it is. But we're trying to desperately cling to this summer theme. And I did in the group chat, I suppose you'd call it. I asked the question, who would be the best snooker player to go on holiday with? Now, of course, the real point about that is, well, what do you like to do on holiday? Because, everyone has different things. Personally, I'm not a great one for sort of exploring. If I go on holiday, I do like to just lie around doing nothing. Now, not everyone likes that. But, I'll throw it to the room. I mean, this is not... No offence should be taken if you're left out or anything that's said here, but best snooker players to go on holiday with. Phil, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Well, yeah, as you said, there's a number of different ways of looking at this, but what I went with, because before COVID, which sort of ruined everything, I had a nice run of trying to go to 3 countries I'd never been to before every year, which I managed for a few years. You'd either do little trips to close ones, or you'd go away and do 3 that are close together, far away. So I would like to get back to going places I've not been before. So I was looking through the list of pros that could take me to where they're from and show me around. And it's an interesting bunch of options. I've not been to Brazil. Jonas Luz could take me to Brazil, but I've never met him before. Could be awkward. Julian Boyko, not been to Ukraine. The one I plumped for, and I've no idea what this is going to be like as a holiday destination. Could be awful, could be good, but I have met him before. Do like him, entertaining character. I want to go to Iran with Hossein Vafai.
Yeah. No, it's good.
So that's my choice.
If you do meet Jonas Luz, I wouldn't open with, "Can I come on holiday with you?" I'd start with something else and then build up to that.
I did meet Victor Sarkis, who I think you could open with that because he was the loveliest bloke. Yeah, I think he would just say yes.
Well, it's a good answer. Yeah, I mean, Hossein would be, it's big news out there, actually. He's obviously snooker's not the biggest sport, but he's got a certain profile, and he would. He's a very hospitable chap, I think. So I think he would look after you, certainly.
Yeah. Well, I feel a bit bad because you've given a very good answer there, I think, and I think I just think if you're going to go on holiday, go with the best person, the best bloke. So I'd go on holiday with Barry Hawkins.
Yeah.
He's the nicest guy. I was just thinking, what sort of monster would you have to be to fall out with Barry Hawkins? I mean, we all have embarrassing moments, don't we, in the press room? There's no point pretending we don't. Moments that we sort of regret and think, oh, I shouldn't have said that, shouldn't have done that, oh, embarrassing. If you came in and said, guys, I've fallen out with Barry Hawkins, you'd be like, chucked out. Not just to the Crucible, probably Sheffield. Get out. And I am an ambivert. I sometimes like people. Mostly I don't. Mostly I'm an introvert. Mostly I like being on my own. And I reckon Barry, so obliging, he'd be a great one for just saying, Barry, I want to go for a bit of a swim this afternoon, you know, have a bit of a wander around the town, go back and watch old videos of Blankety Blank in my room, you know, whatever. And I think he would say, yeah, I'm going to go off and do my own thing as well, actually. I'm going to sort of, you know, have a wander around, have a look at the beach up there, see you for dinner. I think he'd be very obliging. Now, that's the other thing. Neil Robertson, I always think, is the person I most identify with as a human. So I think I'd enjoy going away with him because we'd have lots of great chats about life, I do think. But, yeah, if you're going to go on holiday, go with the best person. There are loads of great people in snooker. The nicest of all is surely Barry.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good shout. I think there's people you couldn't go with. Neil Robertson's actually one of them because he'd probably he'd be late for the flight, on the wrong flight, go to the wrong country, and you know you wouldn't see.
Yeah, but so would I. So that's the.
you couldn't go on holiday with Judd or Jack because they'd be walking around with the top off, showing you up. Okay, so you couldn't do that. There's a few others who, for various reasons, you wouldn't go with. I'm going to throw one in. Ricky Walden, right? I think Ricky Walden is someone because. Inevitably, if you're on holiday with them, going to have to talk to them at some point. And Ricky, actually, you can talk to about things other than snooker. You know, he likes his music. He kind of likes various sort of cultural things. Ken, obviously, is another one. Ken Doherty.
Oh, God.
Very much like Barry, you know. And Ken also seems to like a holiday. If you ever follow him on social media, he seems to be on one permanently, actually. But so those sort of guys, I think what you don't want to fall into is spending 2 weeks or however long it is talking about snooker. So you need people who have other interests. I think Ricky's one of those. Neil Robertson, in fairness, is one as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And Barry would, as you say, just be clubbable. So he would, he would fit in with you. But I don't think there's any prospect of any of this happening because I suspect they possibly don't want to go on holiday with us. Maybe.
Ricky Walden is always one. I think it might be on Eurosport questions or like shootout questions. When who would you most like to go for a drink with? Who the player most go? And Ricky gets so many shouts. Him and Andrew Higginson, who I think are mates as well. So he might be another option.
Yeah, there's this. To be fair, that there's a kind of lot of them. Bingham's another. It's just solid guys, aren't they? You know, Anthony Hamilton, obviously. You know, and actually Maguire as well. They're just solid guys. You know, they don't kind of. Again, it's what we were saying earlier. They don't sort of attempt to sort of force an image on you. They are who they are, and that's fine. And they're happy with that. So why shouldn't anyone else be? But let's move on because we've named a lot of players there. So World Snooker Tour have announced their Fantasy 5 competition. It's fantasy, as it sounds, you have to pick 5 players from different sections of the rankings. And I think we're going to unveil our entries. People have been saying, come on, we've been listening for 45 minutes and we're on tenterhooks. Who you're going to choose. But there was a slight note of controversy from my side last year, which I'm going to address now because, it's quite a strange... Like, there's not a website you can check your scores, which is quite odd for a fantasy competition. So the idea is they email you after each event to say where you are. But I didn't get any emails at all after the Welsh Open, right? And there were another 5 or 6 tournaments. So, and I was doing quite well. Neil Robertson won the World Grand Prix. He was in my thing. I had Trump as well. But so I have no idea what became. I'm not suggesting I won it, but it would have been nice to.
Bill, I'm looking at my watch here. I'm looking at my watch like Fergie. I never imagined it'd be 3/4 of an hour in before the first swipe at World Snooker Tour.
It's not a swipe. It's just a question. It's just a question. Why did? I'm not suggesting it's a conspiracy. It might have been. I'm not suggesting it was. But I didn't get any emails after the Welsh Open. That's just a fact. But anyway, we won't sour it with that. So, Phil, do you want to? I don't know how we're going to do this. Just list the players we picked, I suppose.
Sure. Well, I sort of think the top 2 are obvious, and maybe not. But I went with Judd Trump at the start, followed by Zhao Xingtong in the next category. Then it obviously gets a bit more tricky. There's more choice to be had from there on in, and I think I mean probably a week ago, maybe I wouldn't have gone with Joe O'Connor in my third one, but I was so impressed with him so far this season. Also, I don't know, does the Championship League count in this? Because
I think
obviously
so,
you can
yeah.
just pick Stephen Maguire. Okay,
I think
well,
it does.
maybe should have done that. But anyway, Joe O'Connor was in my third section. Fourth section, because I picked this guy in those World Snooker predictions we did at the start of the season for surprise package or whatever it was badged up as. I went for Zusa, and he actually did well in the Championship League as well, so that was good. And then possibly influenced because we had him on last week and he was very impressive. And he's saying he's practicing more than anyone else on tour. I went with Sam Craigie in the last section because, he's starting at the bottom of the rankings because he's been away, but he's clearly a better prep player than that. So that's my five: Trump, Zhao, O'Connor, Zhu, and Craigie.
Wow.
Solid.
Yeah, very, very interesting and a very decent, very fine selection, actually. Well, I'm going for Kyron Wilson. I mean, no one else seems to think that Kyron will follow up, or not no one, but I think it might be reaching too far, but I think this sort of fits into the little bit of the Kyron not always getting the recognition or maybe even respect a little bit he deserves sometimes. But a lot of people seem to suggest, that's a good season, but it won't happen again. No reason to think why it won't. Mark Selby always gives you one for your money, I think. He'll consistently be there knocking on the door. So I've gone for him in the next one. Wu Yiza reached 2 ranking finals last season and, is clearly someone that's going to be, that phrase knocking on the door a lot in the years to come. Like you sort of suggested there, Phil, I felt I really should follow up that, predictions we did a few weeks ago. Otherwise, God forbid, people might think, that we do it with 5 minutes to spare before we go on air and don't give it any thought. And that would be very unfair. Aaron Hill, I think he'll step up to the plate more and more. No time like the present for him. And of course, he was on here recently and it was great value during the summer, the early part of the summer. And Zach Shirty. Now, and of course, we don't have favourites, Phil. We're not allowed them. But we're fans of Zach, aren't we? We think he's great value, great guy. Massive improvement from him lately. And, why shouldn't it continue?
Yeah, and I think he was the very top of that list of the rankings as well. He was sort of, I did consider him. But he looks great, doesn't he? He looks a completely different player now.
I'll say 2 things about Nick's list. The first, Aaron Hill, I think I actually might get him to do my audio book because I just love the way he speaks. So he's got such a sort of friendly voice. Like Cork accent is brilliant. Kyron Wilson, it'd be an interesting season for him because, of course, now he's not world champion. He won't be quite so prominent in terms of the sort of the table choices. And actually, I think, and he said it himself, and he backed it up by winning those 4 tournaments last year. He really does play his best snooker when he's on the main table. But clearly, Xing Tong's going to get the nod over him, and then you've always got Ronnie and Trump who are going to be sort of maybe ahead of him. Obviously, Kyron's defending a few titles, which will be in his favour. He might get the nod, but that'll be something for him to sort of deal with, I think. And can he sort of put that to one side, just play his best snooker? I have gone for Judd Trump. I do think I've said this many times. I think we do take for granted the idea that he's going to win multiple titles. It's really hard to keep doing that, and it may be that he could have a season where it doesn't happen. If Judd Trump won 2 tournaments, it would feel like a bad season, which is ridiculous. But that's his own standards that we're judging him against. But I think of that 6, he's the most likely to win multiple titles. Obviously, all 3 of the Class of 92 are in there. They're capable, but they don't really see like a John Higgins winning 4 tournaments, or even Ron. I know Ronnie did it 2 years ago, but he's sort of a bit of an unknown at the moment. Ding isn't really doing that anymore. And obviously, Kyron's the other one. So I've gone for Trump. Second bit, I went for Mark Selby as well. I mean, Xing Tong I felt a lot of people would pick Xing Tong. And I just thought if he didn't have such a great season, obviously you've got to pick someone else. So Selby, you just feel he's gonna come good at times. What Mark Selby hasn't done the last few years, he's done well in the really big tournaments. He's lost 2 years running at the Crucible. That's the first time in his career that's happened. Obviously Joe O'Connor and Ben Wollaston, 2 Leicester men, beat him. The Masters, he hasn't been in the semis of the Masters for something like 11 years. And, the UK hasn't won that for a long time. So it's whether he can do it in, obviously, big points counting event. But you just know, the thing with Mark, like so many players as they get older, they have families, they have other interests, and that does eat into their time. Mark's got that as well, but he's still so dedicated. He'll practice properly. He'll do all the right things. So I do fancy him to do well. Then I've gone for 2 Chinese players, Yuan Sijun, who I think, again, we sort of band the Chinese players together a bit too much. They're all different. different personalities, different players. He's still really young. He's only 25. He seems like he's been around a long time.
Yeah.
When he first broke through, Stephen Hendry was very positive about him, praised him up, and he dropped off the tour, but he's got back on. He's at his highest ever ranking, 30. And I just think he's sort of ready maybe to join that list of winners, actually. I think he could win a tournament. Jussa, I did pick him before the Championship League ended. One thing I will say, and this became apparent on the last day, tactically, he is a bit naive. I mean, he lost a frame to Joe O'Connor, he actually needed 4 snookers to tie. He was 67 behind with 51 on. Jussa obviously thought that he won the frame, but when Joe started to put him in trouble, he had no answer at all. And, he shouldn't really lose frames like that. And actually, after that, in another match, he was in a snooker that he just didn't seem to know how to get out of. So that is one concern. But as a scorer, he's made 3 maximums, a lot of centuries to his name last season and in general. So in terms of winning frames in one visit, he'll do that. And, I think he's, again, just looking at him, he's got a good temperament. He doesn't react to stuff. So quietly confident with him. And then the last category, I do feel bad because I told Stephen Hallworth I would pick him and I haven't. I've actually, because I forgot.
That's a way to win friends and influence people, isn't it?
Well, I forgot we were going to be revealing it on a podcast. But anyway, so sorry, Stephen. I did actually pick Sam Craigie. I was very impressed with how he spoke on your podcast last week. I thought, because he hasn't always been that interested in doing interviews and all that. But clearly, I think having the year away and the health problems, he's come back very, very determined. It's still maybe going to be a struggle just getting used to playing again. But he was always a really good player, Sam Craigie. He was always a good player. And he's one of these. He's definitely going to finish, I think probably in the top 64. I think he's going to have a good year. And, he's kind of he was sort of steadily improving before he had to take a step back. He got to that semi-final in Berlin at the German Masters. I think I could see good things for him. So, but it'd be interesting because, last year, I don't think any of us would have picked like Zhao Guodong, for example. And I suspect maybe even the person who won might have had him because he had such a good season. So someone's going to, who we haven't thought of, is going to do something. Like a Chris Wakelin, actually. He would have been a good pick for that second band because, he's really, really improved, really, really dedicated. So we'll see. But anyway, for what it's worth, that's who I picked.
Yeah. I think Zhao Guodong's quite an interesting one this season, actually, because he came the season before. Zhang Anda had the amazing season out of nowhere, really, didn't he? And then he didn't really follow it up, and he really dropped off again. But Zhao was so good last season, sort of out of nowhere. So it'd be really interesting to see if he is now a top player or it was just a good season because he looked unbelievable. It was so consistent. So it's just like, have you actually leveled up, or was that just a purple patch? It's just interesting to see how that shakes out.
He had one of the great days of the season, the champion of champions. He beat Ronnie O'Sullivan and Mark Selby on the same day. He was 3-0 down to Ronnie, having potted a ball.
Yeah.
And then in the evening, he beat Selby in a dramatic decider, which, you fancy Selby. And I had to interview him because Rob Walker had to he was up for an award, so he had to go down to London. And
that's a very Rob Walker sentence, isn't it?
Well, he was nominated for commentator of the year.
I bet he was quiet about it, though. I bet he didn't tell anyone he was up for it.
He was nominated for commentator of the year. But here's the thing, right? So, and, as he should be, Paralympics and athletics and all the rest of it. But it was won by a colleague of mine actually at TNT, Rob Hatch, who's a brilliant cycling commentator. Yeah. But obviously, as they're reading out the winner, he said, and the commentator of the year is Rob, and just for half a second, he said, I just got out of my seat and then had to sit down again. What was I saying there?
Sorry, that was rude of me.
Oh, Zhao Guodong, yeah. So Rob had gone to this thing. So I had to interview him, and he was so humble about it all. Oh, I was lucky, and I was lucky to beat them. No, you weren't. You played really well. And actually, I never know whether that's a good thing to be too humble, but maybe it's better than coming in swaggering as if I'm going to win the tournament. He didn't actually, but Mark Williams did. But that was a sign that he'd actually arrived really to beat those two on the same day. But like you say, you've got to kind of back it up. Zhang Anda's now got all those points coming off this year. Yeah. So if he doesn't do anything, he could be back almost to where he was before he started the great run. That's the system that sort of keeps you on your toes, I suppose.
Well, Basing Saddles, by the way, if your team was called Basing Saddles, then you won that competition last season. I do know that. I've seen that on WST. So you're off to. I thought I don't know if it was a mistake. It said hospitality for the 2027 World Championship. I don't know why you'd have to wait that long. I'm not sure I saw that on the page. I thought, well, surely you want to go in 26, wouldn't you?
Well, I suppose the competition maybe still be going on then, I guess, because if it goes to the end of the season. You could come to the Championship League next summer and experience the Fridge of Doom. Maybe that could be a prize.
Do you know how shameless I am? Rob Francis, he doesn't even love it. He quite likes my Brentwood digs. Now, on the basis of one person quite liking it, I'll do it every week. Everyone else might think it's rude, mean, unfunny, unpleasant. But because I know one person is getting a bit of a laugh, I'll do it. And I was saying to you, on our little group chat, what you really want is hospitality at Brentwood. And I was thinking, what would that involve? And I was suggesting maybe it means they sort of warm up the sausage roll a bit. And I thought that's okay, wasn't it? And I've got to say, weren't we chatting, Phil? And he was suggesting a few lengths to the pool, and I sort of thought that's too good. That's too much of a nice thing. So I just think, a few more onions on the burger maybe, and a warmed up sausage roll. That's Brentwood hospitality.
Yeah, you can really go to town on the vending machine. Maybe that'd be a good price.
A fiver in the vending machine.
It's an interesting venue because one thing it does get a crowd. That's actually they sell out, but it's clearly it still belongs to a different era. I think in a lot of ways snooker has professionalised. I mean, they're going to Shanghai next week, one of the great cities of the world. Yeah. Leaving aside the sort of arguments around Saudi, that is still a big step forward to go to a historic city like Jeddah, and obviously a lot of the Chinese cities, they really make a statement. Belfast is brilliant. Actually, Telford's a really good venue, and doesn't sound. I know
I've not been there. Yeah,
not the most exotic sounding place, but actually the venue's brilliant. But then there's still that carryover. Some of the qualifying venues. They're actually the UK qualifying is in Wigan, which doesn't sound like. Really where the UK Championship should be. So there's still that kind of... The problem in Britain is the venues are really expensive. I mean, that's just a fact. So you can understand why for qualifying, and they need a big venue to get lots of tables in. But Brentwood, obviously, there's a tie with Matchroom there. That's where they're based. We haven't quite moved on completely from the old era. There's still some of those venues they used to go to, and people said we need to move on from them. We have, to a large degree, moved on, but not completely.
Yeah. I mean, it comes up every so often, and it's obviously much easier said than done, but it'd be so good if World Snooker just owned a venue that all the qualifiers could be in, and they could even stream, well, they could stream the qualifiers, but they could stream behind closed doors tournaments. Like, I brought it up loads on here, but, like the Darts Players Championship, they have sort of 30 behind closed doors tournaments over the season, which is just such a regular stream of income for players that are just sort of squeezed in between the big tournaments. And if there was just a snooker venue where all this stuff could be housed, that was good and the conditions were great, maybe you could even fit a few fans in if you wanted to, but wouldn't have to. That would solve a lot of problems. It wouldn't solve the Brentwood problem for the English Open, but it would solve a number of other problems. But as I say, easier said than done. But it can't be out of the question to buy a big old, it wouldn't have to be anything fancy, just something where enough space for a load of tables.
Well, Rex Williams had that idea literally 25 years ago when he was chairman of the WPBC. It never quite happened for whatever reason. There was talk they were going to try and buy Preston Guildhall. That didn't happen. Whether now they would do it because snooker's become more global, do they want a permanent venue in Britain? There could be an argument against that. I'm not sure. But because what will be interesting to see is, what happens to the home nations anyway, because it's the last year of it. Is it going to continue? I don't know. I hope so, but maybe they might look elsewhere and maybe keep some of the tournaments, not all of them. The English has never really had the identity of the others. The Belfast, obviously, everyone sort of understands what that means. Edinburgh now, the Scottish, the Welsh has moved around a bit, but that's a tournament that had a history anyway. It's always kind of felt like it's always been there. The English, can people name all the venues of the English Open? We probably could because we're sad enough. But it's kind of Barnsley, Manchester. I think it's been to Crawley, of course. I mean, that was kind of the nadir of it all. But people had to go at Crawley. I mean, is the Brentwood Centre really any better than that K2 Centre? I'm not sure.
Oh, it's worse.
There you go. That answers that.
Crawley it's a far nicer facility, I would say. But listen, Brentwood's got its own qualities as well, of course. But listen, I don't know why they didn't stick with that Manchester one. I know the rain came down on the roof, that interrupted the final a bit. But everyone I speak to said it was all right that week. Again, it might have just been cost, but that wasn't that the first one. I never quite understood. I know it was a bit out of Manchester and all that. It wasn't right in the centre.
It was by the Arndale Centre, I think. It's a big venue, which obviously you need. I thought it was fine. You don't always. The problem is, again, because sometimes the dates change. It might not be available on the same dates. It might be booked for something else. That is an issue. I don't think it's easy booking venues, and they are expensive. But if we're trying to, I think snooker has become more professional. I do, but I think every now and again, you're sort of reminded that in some ways, because obviously we're a sport that doesn't have permanent venues. Tennis has permanent venues, golf, cricket, football, all these places have purpose-built venues. We don't. We go to other people's venues and try and make it work. And that's a sort of disadvantage we have. And people are not slow to complain about the venues, that players, fans, media, everybody, if they don't quite cut it. But particularly now the players are going out to these great venues overseas. When they come back to the UK, I think they have an expectation they should be better. And now some of them are really good. I think Cheltenham actually has built up really well over the years. I think that's a good venue now. It wasn't early on. People weren't sure about it. I think it's good now. And, the Waterfront Hall is fantastic. I've not been to the one in Scotland, but I've heard good reports. I really like the one in Llandudno. I think it's a terrific venue. So we've got some really good ones. I suppose, I'm sure World Snooker are looking at other places. There's a new place in Derby I know they've looked at, a new venue that could work well as a two-table venue. But, they had the one in Swansea. Everyone said how good that was. And then we just haven't been back there. So, I don't know. I'm sure cost comes into it. It has to.
I've got the feeling Swansea was very, very expensive. That's a plush place, that one is. Loads of snooker history in Derby, by the way. I didn't know about that, but that's some great snooker. My phone will not still let me write Wuhan Open without correcting it to the Wigan Open. I mean, it's just absurd. I don't think the Wigan Open would have a lot of gravitas.
No, but that, as I say, they're having the UK qualifying. Robin Park Sports Centre. So
yes.
Yeah, I think the point
that's
about
a silencer.
The point about sort of how good the venues are in China and now Saudi as well and other places. I think that's what harms from the players' point of view the Crucible as well sometimes, because obviously the fans only care about their experience and the arena and everything, but I think it's more sort of the backstage bit that players talk about that probably doesn't cut through because it's only those guys that experience it. But the backstage bit of the Crucible is very sort of old-fashioned and not been updated for a while, pokey little dressing rooms. And I think, when Hossein Vafai was sort of complaining about that kind of thing, I think compared to, some of the places they go to now, it does seem very outdated.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're on to this again, the Crucible, but what they actually need there is almost a separate building to do all that stuff. You don't actually need the Players' Lounge in the Crucible. If you had another building outside, even if you had to erect one in Tudor Square, whatever, you could get sort of better facilities. Years ago, they had porter cabins where Embassy would do the wining and dining, old sponsors, cigarette sponsors. So that wouldn't be anything new. The point about theatres is backstage, by its very nature, you're not supposed to see it. It's just functional. It's where, people work. Obviously, the Crucible was never intended to host a sporting event, but there's nothing they can do to change that. It is what it is. So the only thing they could do is, as I say, put all that stuff elsewhere. Like the BBC now go to the Winter Garden to present their coverage because they felt sitting in the practice room was a bit kind of cramped. So, there are kind of ways of getting around that. But again, I guess money comes into it, and it's how much the city council there, I suppose, want to contribute and all the rest of it. I'm sure we'll find that out eventually.
I think it was you recently, Dave, that was saying that, sort of lamenting really and saying we see too much of what happens around the back now. And there's a balance, isn't there? I mean, listen, we wouldn't have had that great comedy moment of Phil talking to Dave Gilbert about porridge, on the first morning of the championship if we didn't have cameras backstage. But it's funny, isn't it? Because certain parts of life, the royal family, you still don't see anything really. So that's always kept to some extent. It's, you don't see what goes on really. Politics, you see a lot more than you used to. I was having a discussion with my sister only recently. I was saying, those big beasts of the 80s in politics, and, we're losing a lot of them now. They were so distant from us. Okay, we were young anyway, but they were voices on the wireless. You see them on the telly. They were just so far away from us. But going off a tangent here. Now everyone's so close, you can tweet them, and the world's closer now. And that's good in lots of ways, of course, but maybe we see a bit too much of the back of the crucible. There's a balance to be struck. You don't want everything to be a secret from the public, but at the same token, we don't need to be sort of, almost rummaging in the drawers in the background and seeing sort of, or the tournament office and stuff, or the I know we don't see that off much. You know what I mean? All the corridors. There's no sort of secrets, are there anymore?
No, I mean, back in the day, you'll remember when David Hendon used to present from the practice room, and you'd hear sort of balls being knocked in, and then every now and again they'd pan the camera, and there'd be Tony Knowles, or Doug Mountjoy practicing, and it felt sort of thrilling. Or we're getting a glimpse of them practicing. Now, what you get is whoever the equivalent of those players are now, they'd be like on Instagram taking pictures of the practice room, and there's no sort of, and it's good that people get to see that stuff, but there's no mystery to it now. You can see all the bits you were never supposed to see, you will see.
I think they stopped it, but there was definitely a year where they had cameras in the dressing rooms.
Yeah.
I think it was the last Murphy Selby final, because I remember
that was too much.
I think I agree. And it wasn't even, well, maybe because it was still sort of COVID-y, so I don't think I remember them cutting to Bjorn's dressing room, and he was just sort of sat there, just sort of staring at the wall, eating a bag of crisps. What are we even getting out of this? It was very weird.
Yeah. Well, we've had an email actually from Brian Campbell, who I think we've all met. Loyal fan. He's actually asked for the special, so it ill behooves not to read it out. Really, he says, "Talking Snooker Scene Summer Special is the best summer special since the Beano I used to get as a kid during the holidays back in the late 70s, early 80s. He's setting the bar low here, to be honest. But anyway, he says, "I have a couple of questions, if I may. Firstly, are you all used to having fans now? And how did you feel the first time a listener came up to say hello? Secondly, apart from those with a snooker theme, do you listen regularly to any other podcasts? And if so, what would you recommend? Keep up the great work. It's really appreciated." Well, I mean, in terms of fans, I mean, obviously, it's not Beatlemania, is it? Let's be honest. I mean, it's I think we can sort of cope with. People are always friendly. That's the thing. This is why I always think people should never think that social media is any barometer of anything. It's a barometer. It's representative of the medium itself, not people in general. Because you meet snooker fans at tournaments, they're always really polite, enthusiastic. They might say nice things, but basically they just want to chat about snooker, which is absolutely no problem. So I've never had any issue with anyone. It's always nice to speak to people. I met the lovely Chow from China in The Graduate. She gave me some lovely gifts, very nice. So, it's very nice if people take something from this podcast and indeed yours, if it in any way sort of helps their enjoyment of the sport, that can only be good.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And it is lovely in Sheffield, actually. I could give a sort of funny answer, but it is lovely. When we hear people and people will come up to us and say, recognise you a bit, and you'll get it more, Dave, because your face is far more visible. But we do get it, of course, particularly around that championship, and York and maybe other big ones as well. And it's really nice. We post the odd photo, don't we, and people say they listen to us, and it's just a lovely way of sort of chatting to people. And listen, we say it more and more now. I was thinking earlier, while sort of thinking about this episode a bit, the funny thing about the Crucible debate, which I'm back to a bit, is the worrying thing, or the sad thing in a way, is it's getting better and better in Sheffield. It's not like, it's getting a bit worse, maybe it's getting a bit tired. No, it's better than it's ever been outside there in Tudor Square. It's like a music festival at times. And that bit, funny enough, Brian came to chat to us together, didn't he, Dave, at the recent World Championship. But people will, in the pubs and the cafes and, sometimes they'll hear the voice even and say, listen to the pod. And, it's just really, really, just lovely to chat to people. And, and you can't do it so much in life, can you? I mean, I love all sports, and obviously football is the national language, really. You go into, went to my local place this morning chatting about the game. You do that anywhere. Snooker, that's harder to come by. You can find it in normal life, but not as much. So the beauty of those tournaments is you're chatting with snooker people. That's one of the things I take away from Sheffield every year, more than anything, maybe. Just being able to chat with snooker people about the game. I love that. As for other podcasts, well, again, I'm a sports fanatic, so a lot of sort of NFL ones, a lot of football ones. That's my sort of holy trinity of sports now, really. So I've always loved American voices, me. I find them sort of so interesting, that ridiculous levels of charisma. Like, I've gone to America a lot in my life, and, you can have a cab driver and he's, you think this guy should be on the telly. He's so entertaining. And that's kind of what Americans are like. And I love them. generally American voices, so NFL podcasts work for me. But yeah, the football ones, the athletic football podcast, and the Guardian podcast, Monday Night Club. I know it's a radio show, effectively, but L5 Live with Mark Chapman, and I think I love hearing things like that. They give me great company and great comfort. So yeah, things like that really. And sorry, Phil, over to you.
No, I'd say the same about people coming to speak to us. It's great. Yeah, no, love that. There was that one time me and Nick where we signed an autograph in the after party after the Crucible. That was quite odd. It remains the one and only time I've had to do that. But yeah, no, otherwise it's lovely meeting people that listen to podcasts or read your work or anything. Because as you say, Dave, everyone's so nice about it. So it's great. Yeah, the podcast, yeah, I listen to loads. It's such a great medium. Three Bean Salad is probably my favorite at the minute. Comedy podcast. It's just three comedians, Mike Wozniak, Henry Packer, and Ben Partridge, just chatting absolute garbage. Really, there's there's not much format to it, but they're three very very funny guys, super clever. So yeah, I'd recommend that. If you fancy a laugh, they've done a lot of series, so you can go right back to the start and go through it. It's very funny.
Well, shameless name plug. I bumped into James Acaster this morning. He's local. He's local to me. Big podcast player. And you honestly, Phil, he was talking a different language. Apart from the mic he recommended was one that I was going to buy but didn't do it. But he was talking about, oh no, I'd record it on this particular forum, and of course I've got a producer. And I thought, oh James, this is the difference. You see, this is the food. This is the food chain, Colonel. You're sort of right at the top, and I'm like, it's very nice to chat to him. But yeah, I thought, yeah, different world. But that was very nice. Anyway, that's my maybe one shameless name drop of the episode, Dave Hendon.
No, it's a good one. It's a good one. I'm just looking at the podcast I subscribe to here. Well, the one I've listened to the longest is Simon Mayo, Mark Kermode film podcast. I tend to listen to sort of things about the arts, theatre, film, so on. So there's one here, Talking Pictures, which is they take a sort of actor every week and they just talk about the films that have meant a lot to them. It's like sort of like Desert Island Discs with films, I suppose. The rest is entertainment with
I like that.
Rena Hyde is really, really interesting. It's actually genuinely informative about how TV works and what the sort of stories are around it. I've just started listening to one. It's called Rosebud with Giles Brandreth, and it basically takes a sort of guest each week, and they talk about sort of their upbringing and their parents and the sort of small things in life. But it can be really sort of moving just hearing the little details about where people came from and the people sort of important to them. And the News Agents as well, which is a news podcast, they have very good guests on there and a lot of sort of good access to people. So yeah, podcasting, I mean, it still feels relatively new as a medium, but it's sort of, it's obviously we have radio and that's brilliant, but it's obviously whatever subject you're interested in, someone will be doing a podcast and it's quite intimate and you sort of do feel you get to know the people on it. And yeah, I mean, long may it continue.
Yeah, and I think because it is it feels so personal because it just feels like you almost have a conversation with one person that you can listen to a number of ones on the similar topic. It doesn't feel like overkill. I think now there's quite a number of snooker podcasts, isn't there? But they all feel like they've got their own slight different flavour. Yeah. Obviously, we're covering similar topics, of course, but I don't feel like I'm listening to one and think, oh, we've already been through this on another. So, yeah, they're great because they're so even ones that overlap territory, they are unique.
And I've got to say, the right time is to say, Dave, I've got to say, congratulations, haven't we, Phil? We've got to say congratulations on 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
Come on, the decade. We are the EastEnders to your Coronation Street. You really are, Corrie. You've done it so long. And seriously, it's different sort of manifestations, isn't it? You did a lot of the interviews early on, a lot of those sort of ones I love with the bingo with Phil Yates. You had Michael McMullen for a while. Now you've done it more on your own. Because it's not like, Dave's done the same thing for 10 years. Still impressive. You've done all sorts of different things within that same format. So hats off. Haven't got a hat. If I would, I'd be taking it off.
I can do that, yeah.
Oh, you can? Yes, quite. It's a great effort, sir. Must say that before we forget to.
Well, thank you. I mean, yeah, to be honest, you would know this working together. In some ways, would be better with a co-host, but the problem is so many of the episodes I record are sort of between commentary shifts where you've just got to do it then, and you can't always arrange it with someone else to get them available. I mean, when I did it with Michael, he's got 2 young children, obviously, and sometimes we'd have to look after them and we'd have to postpone it. And it just became a little bit difficult to carry on doing it like that. So a lot of the episodes I do, I'll literally, I've got an hour to do it and I just sit down and do it then. But in some ways, without being sort of, cloyingly sentimental, the co-presenter is actually the listeners, because they write in. We always get a lot of interesting emails. And I do feel that, that is kind of the other voice, if you like. I know I'm reading them out on their behalf, but, they're sort of interacting in that way. So, yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not expecting the MBE for it, but I've managed to keep it going. It's more regular than it used to be. But I think podcasting, I mean, as we know, Jake Humphrey actually invented podcasting about 5 years ago, even though I've been doing it for 10 years. So, but now it has become more like I don't think now you can get away with doing it every 3 weeks. You've got to do it regularly. Because people have a certain expectation, they're subscribing to it. And as I say, because people are good enough to email in, there's plenty of material.
And it's still essential listening every week. I don't miss an episode, Dave. It's
thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sure
apart from this one, maybe skip this one.
I did think Brian announcing this is the best summer special since what he said before. It hasn't even been recorded yet, so he's got very high expectations.
He'll be writing in next week with a retraction. But anyway, we're tight for time, so we were going to promise rash predictions. I always think, like, what's the point in trying to predict the UK champion now? I mean, we don't even know who's going to be there, do we? But I suppose it's more. Well, let's start with just what do we think about Zhao Xingtong? I mean, I suppose the shorthand would be: is it going to be Luca Brissell or Kyron Wilson for him this season? I think more likely the latter, but I don't know. I get the feeling he could actually just become a superstar but in a couple of years. I think he could end up the richest ever snooker player because of all the endorsements if he keeps winning world championships. He was so impressive in his general so what kind of attitude to coming back and playing at the Crucible and winning the world championship. It was all a bit of a shrug, of course, because he knows he's really good, I suppose. And I just get the feeling, I'd get the feeling of carrying on. I'm not saying he's going to win 7 tournaments this year, but I'd be amazed if he didn't win something.
Yeah, I'm in that camp as well. He's much closer to the Kyron than the Luca model for me. It's a bit of an unknown, isn't he? Because it's like he's a different player than before the ban, because he's now got this air of invincibility. Like, he's won sort of 46 out of 48 games or something. I don't know, a lot of that was in amateur snooker, but he barely has lost for ages. And that just wasn't what he was like before. We all knew how talented he was, and he won those couple of tournaments, but he lost early a lot, and he lost to players you wouldn't expect him to. And he wasn't sort of a regular in the semi-finals and finals and stuff. But now he sort of feels like he might be just all the time. But it's too hard. It's too hard to say he's going to sort of sweep aside competition and dominate things. But yeah, I'd be surprised if he doesn't pick up a couple of tournaments this year. No idea what they would be. It ain't going to be the World Championship because he's cursed, like everyone else is. Yeah. But yeah, I would expect him to win a couple of tournaments this year, which would count as a brilliant season, as it should for anyone.
Yeah, in agreement with that, really. I suppose the sort of boring answer would be he might do 3/4 of what Kyron did, so to win 3, so very nearly what Kyron did type thing. That wouldn't at all surprise me. I mean, you did that great piece, Phil, and the aforementioned Michael McMullen always bangs his drum that. And I'm guilty of this, actually. I've been in that camp. Loads of world champions struggle the year after. It's actually a bit more nuanced than that. There are 5 or 6 names that really have, but over a period of 30, 40 years, plenty have done okay. And maybe, as Michael would say, most have done what you kind of expect of them. And maybe we're just swung a bit by the ones that do badly. I mean, Luca did particularly badly, but then he's a particular kind of person, isn't he? He didn't particularly apply himself.
I think I'm right in saying Ronnie O'Sullivan only won 1 tournament when I think it was the UK Championship, but not a small one. Yeah. But obviously, there haven't always been 18 events to play. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
It's different when you're a new world champion. There is scrutiny. I just think Zhao Xingtong doesn't care about that. In fact, I think he revels in it.
Yeah.
I think. And I say this not in a critical way. I think there is a sort of bit of arrogance about him, which I think you need if you're at the top. I think, it's more that he just knows he's good. He just knows he's good. And listen, he can be very significant. Well, talking to some of the players, a lot of the players at the Championship League, they're all kind of, they got annoyed about the ranking points thing. That's another thing. But they're all agreed that he will be good for the game. Yeah. He's a sort of new star in China. He's going to unlock potentially more revenue for the sport, and they kind of see the bigger picture in that way. Any more general predictions? Nick, you mentioned the Crucible.
I think that we'll hear an announcement that the World Championship will stay at the Crucible, but it will be a short-term thing because they haven't got a long-term situation sorted. I think they might do, say, 3 years. So we'll take you into the 2030s, up to 2030. We haven't quite got the deal. We all love the Crucible. We haven't sorted out the long-term future. So while we're still working on that, we'll have 3 more years here. And so, I mean, it's I think it'll be a sort of in-between one. The other one, a little bit, is what I did on that predictions one for WST. The Kyron to be world number 1. Judd's so far ahead, although Kyron's got to lose points, although Judd's got to lose points as well, that it seems unlikely. Xiao Tom could do it as well, but if Kyron wins in Saudi, we won't be saying that. Put it that way. So it feels a bit rash to say anyone but Judd, but that's kind of what I've done. So maybe that one. But yeah, the Crucible. We all think we're going to get some defining thing. It won't be that. It will be a sort of fudge and in between.
Yeah, and the problem, I think you're probably right. And the problem with that is, of course, the stories about will it leave the Crucible will continue. It's just not that it will be leaving in 2027. It'll be okay, but what about after that? So that story would just be continually written again. Okay, it's got a stay of execution. That's how it would be written up, isn't it? But what happens then? So it wouldn't sort of put to bed. I guess it would please snooker fans, the idea there's at least 3 more. I tend to think, I tend to think that the closer we get to the decision, the more likely, because no one has actually, this is interesting, not one person has come up with an alternative venue. Yeah. We've talked about leaving, but no one has said, oh, let's go to the Royal Albert Hall or wherever. So it's not like another venue's bidding against the Crucible. The Crucible is favourite because it's the only venue that's been mentioned in the whole debate,
Yeah, and I think that you have to have that because I'm sort of naturally leaning to stay at the Crucible because I'm massively biased a little bit. But you have to put forward an alternative because maybe you could show me something that is there and I could be swung, but you can't swing me towards just the idea of some mega palace in Saudi Arabia or something without knowing anything. Like, as you say, there might be a better one in the UK, but we won't know until someone suggests one.
Yeah. It's not even a prediction really. It's just a thought I had, and it kind of makes no sense when you look at the rankings because they are respectively 3, 4, and 5. The class of '92. It's possible they won't between them will not win a ranking event this season. I think every season one of them's won at least one, and of course a lot of seasons they've dominated. It seems odd because 2 of them are right back to form, and Ronnie, he's still capable of winning anything. But there's going to come a time they're all going to be 50 by the end of the year. 2 are already. There will actually come a time when they won't quite be as competitive as the top players. I don't think we're there yet because the rankings speak for themselves, but at some point it will happen. And I suppose you've got to say, well, maybe it'll be sooner rather than later. I think they've all done amazingly to still be at the top of the game. And I love watching all of them. I think they've still got a lot to contribute. But maybe people like Xing Tong will actually, pick up the baton and run away with it. And maybe we'll look back and say, was this the beginning of the end for them? I suspect, in by the end of next month, when probably the 3 tournaments have been won by the class of '92 between them, I'll have to issue a public apology. But it could be the case that it starts. Maybe it starts this year. I don't know. I kind of hope not. Actually, I like the fact they're still going. I think it's a great story.
Yeah, and this is very funny actually because I was gonna suggest is this rash enough, but in that context, it is certainly rash because I've got written down here all of the class of '92 will win an event this season.
There you go.
And to give some sort of balance, I also sort of see one of the young guys doing well. So say Wu Yiza won it, then that would be a 30-year difference between ranking event winners this season, which would be sort of fascinating stuff. If Williams won one later and he's 21, he's 51, and Wu's 21, I could see that happening because Williams sort of looks as likely to win one as he has done for a long time. He's pretty consistent. If Higgins can keep the form of last season, at the second half of last season, then he's in the contention. And then Ronnie, as we say, you don't know. But he did say he's going to get stuck in properly for 2 years just in tournaments. And, what does that mean? We'll see. But, put it this way. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened for sure. The other rash prediction I've gotten written down, which then I looked at the calendar and it's not even on there yet, so I don't even know. But I said someone will do the Golden Ball break. But I don't know if that tournament going to be on the calendar.
I think it is on in, I believe, November.
Right.
Round then. Yeah, it's kind of a bit mysterious what that's worth now, but it will be something on Ronnie. I think this is just a theory, and of course he saw it at first hand because Zhao Xingtong took him apart in that semi-final. I think he knows he's got to change something to keep up with him. Obviously Zhao's a young guy. He's kind of, I don't say the new Ronnie O'Sullivan, but he is where Ronnie was like 25 years ago, the hot new star, making waves. So he knows he's going to have to work hard, and that's what he's always done, Ronnie. People think he just turns up and it's all natural, and there's a lot of natural ability, but he has worked as hard as anybody over the years on different things, different coaches, different cue actions, different cues, and of course he'll have a new cue after smashing the one up last season. And I'm sure, away from all the sort of the glare of the spotlight, he's been putting the work in. We'll see whether it works or not, but Shanghai is somewhere he's always played well. So it could just be next week. It wouldn't surprise me if he won that. And that would be an interesting narrative, wouldn't it? Because he's sort of, in a way, the sort of king across the water now. There's other judges taking titles, Kyron, Zhao Xingtong. Those three feel like the big three in a way. But Ronnie is bigger than any of them, actually. And he'll be determined to prove that, I'm sure. Otherwise, what's the point in playing? He's not just going to turn up for the hell of it. What is the point? He wants to. He's proud, and as he should be, he's a great champion. He will look at it and think this is a challenge.
Yeah, and in a way, the World Championship was quite concerning in terms of, he played pretty badly, and there was obviously so much going through his head that made him make those quite mad decisions. But he got to the semi-final and he was at 50% of his best, not even that. So if he can half click at some point this season, then he can easily win tournaments.
Yeah.
What's your gut feeling on whether he wins an eighth now? I think I'm probably leaning towards no.
I think he will possibly have one more good chance. And what I mean by that is, I'm not saying he'll only play it one more time, but one more time where he goes there and he feels confident in his game, and maybe the draw helps, and just the stars kind of align. And if they do, yes, he will. I think it's kind of the percentage maybe of likelihood he's coming down, but he could easily go there and just blow one away. He's still capable, but it's going to have to happen soon, isn't it? It doesn't seem like, when he's sort of 56, it doesn't seem likely to happen. So certainly the next few years, it's kind of got to happen, or it won't. We're into big numbers. 8 is only significant because he's tied on 7. If he was tied on 6, 8 wouldn't really matter. It's just that final sort of bit of his career, the final full stop. I've actually beaten the record. But I mean, if he ends up having done all he's done and with 7, I don't think he's going to sort of, be on his deathbed, in tears, crying about it. I don't think he could care less, really. But it would, in a historical sense, it would sort of complete the story.
I quite like the idea of it being 7-7, me. Yeah, I quite like the idea of that. I said that, I think when he got 7, wouldn't bother me at all if it's 7-7 between those two wonderful greats. Feel fitting in a way.
There is something about the World Championship that does seem to be sort of frying his brain a bit in recent years, I think. That game he lost to Luca, what were the odds of that? And he really played badly, as much as Luca played well. He had a bit of a meltdown in that Bingham loss where he was having to go at the ref and stuff. Obviously, this year, going and changing your Farrell in the middle of the game is mental. It does seem to be doing things to him. He seems to be affected by the pressure there a bit more than he would be elsewhere, I think. So I think, he does like to portray that he's not fussed about things, but I think it does seem to be rattle him a little bit there.
And what about, just sort of maybe to bring this section of the show to an end, sort of new winners? I mean, I kind of went for Elliot Slessor on that World Snooker prediction, so I think he's much improved. But it's easy to say, someone will win a tournament. I think we saw in the Championship League final, I mean, Joe O'Connor hadn't lost a match all season. He won 11. He played magnificently. But there was something about a final, even quite a low-key one, I suppose, in that environment, no crowd, where you could tell immediately that Maguire was going to up his game, and Joe slightly struggled to keep with him. Stephen played really well, but he played really well because it was the final. So even sort of for new players, it's difficult to make that final step to actually win one. It does happen, and we've seen it happen, but it's kind of where you really find out about a player. Can they actually do it? There'll be someone, like I'm sure, like Lepe Fan, who just comes along and kind of just does it, and no one thought they would. And obviously, the thing with those players is you can't really predict them. It's a bolt from the blue, and someone will probably do that. I'm sure there's enough tournaments. But kind of Slessor, I do think has improved, and his attitude's improved, and he sort of seems he's on that list now for me.
I got on with that. A Slessor, a Craigie, maybe an Aaron Hill. I said the next one to be the maiden event winner would be Haigh. I was really taken by Sean Murphy saying at the World Championship that, we've seen what he can do now. He's been brilliant in a few World Championships in a row. Yes, he's very young, but now let's see you step up and win trophies. And I thought that was kind of about right, the way he said that, really, because, if you're good enough in this sport, it doesn't matter what age you are. We've seen loads of very, very young players win it, throughout the history. So I think it's sort of him. But you're right, there'll be a bolt from the blue. Jordan Brown, we never would have believed. There'll be that kind of thing. And that, there's so many tournaments, the chances of that, increase. But it's interesting. The class of 92 point, Dave, I think that is kind of bold because of what we've just seen John Higgins do in the spring. If he hadn't done that, I wouldn't think that was that bold. But I'm sort of struggling to see now John having done that, him sort of not winning something again this season. It's the way snooker works. It's kind of like, we thought he'd never win anything again. Now he's won 2. I'll be surprised if he doesn't win anything again, and soon, because he's on that roll type thing. But anyway, that's my one bit of genuine waffle of the episode, Phil. You always need one of those.
I had and there's pre-season predictions. I had Wu Yize down as my first time winner. 2 finals last season, but I would say that final against Lay will have sort of knocked him a bit because he went into that as hot favourite. He wouldn't have been favourite against Robertson in the English, but he was expected to beat Lay and struggled. But C and Wu are sort of there, ready to go, aren't they? I think everyone expects them to rack up plenty of titles over their careers. It's just when it starts.
Sorry, Phil. I was going to say it's what I made earlier. Can they actually step up? Because Sijol was very disappointing in that final against Xiao Guidong. Like you say, Wu Yize was disappointing against Lei Pei Fan when they were kind of favourites in those finals. So it's the missing piece of the puzzle. I'm not saying they won't do it. I think they're fantastic players, but they've got to. We sort of drag Jack Lazowski into this. It's the same argument, isn't it? It's whether you can take that great talent and actually turn it into silverware. Or glassware in some cases. And we'll see. Let's hope they do.
Oh, Phil, that trophy was diabolical, wasn't it? I mean, come on, let's talk about trophies. That was terrible. You couldn't see it, like you said.
Yeah, I think for a month-long tournament, you can rustle something better up than that. I think.
They spent all the money on the fridge. What do you want? We've got to eat.
Yeah, I think with Wu it is worth saying. We quite often. Everyone is guilty at some stage of saying, "Oh, that's going to happen." Nothing's nailed on, is it? And he's very young. He's 21. So if I had to put my money on anything, it would be on Wu Yize winning a few titles. But you can never be complacent. Nothing's guaranteed.
We haven't mentioned Phil Yates for half an hour. Phil Yates would always say, and I can hear him now. He sort of can't stand it when a person will say, a pundit or whoever's, "Oh, that player's going to win the World Championship." Phil will say, "You can never say that about the World Championship." And there we are. The wisdom of Phil is never too far away. You're a great mate, Dave.
Indeed, yeah. I put the pool on last night briefly, and he was commentating, and someone, I think it was I can't remember the players. Let's say it was Johan Chua for argument's sake. He was winning a rack. He just potted the 9 ball and he was miles in front in the match. And Phil said, this is an actual line of commentary. He said, well, I've just been told there's a cat in the arena. So you could say we've gone from feline to Johan Chua making a beeline for the next round. Yeah, so I immediately emailed BAFTA to let them know. And I'm sure he'll be duly rewarded. He'll be duly rewarded. That's what he said. And good luck to him.
Good luck to him.
There's a line, and I've got no idea what tournament it is, but you can find it on YouTube if you search the right thing, where he says something like, so he's talking about Tom Ford, and then he says, "Oh, and another player from the East Midlands with a 4-letter surname did something similar yesterday." He was talking about, it was just like the weirdest segue to talk about Michael Holt, and he's on with Foldsy, and Neil just goes, "Phil, that's an absolutely extraordinary thing to say."
Well,
really makes me laugh.
Again, because sometimes we have to commentate together at the Championship League, just the way it works. And this is another thing he said, and it's on YouTube. Rob Spencer was reffing, and Rob did every day, and I just said, one of the great stalwarts, putting in a shift. And Phil said, yeah, he said, Rob's really interesting to talk to. He said, I was just talking to him upstairs, and he told me, I can't believe I'm even saying this, he told me that the mother of Mike Nesmith from the Monkees invented Tipex. Where could you go from that? What could you say to it? The mother of Mike Nesmith from the Monkees invented Tipex.
Wow! Now that is the best thing on this episode. Other people might think that's not so much. I mean, people can see your face now, Dave. Absolutely, just wonderful laughter. That is extraordinary. That is extraordinary. I don't know where to go from that.
You could replace goodbye bye with just saying that fact at the end of episodes. And just, if anyone's listening for the first time, be very, very confused.
There's a lot in there. I mean, I don't even know if Tipex is still a thing. The Monkees, you have to explain to people who they were. But I don't know how Rob Spencer knew it either. That's the other part of it.
Yeah. Wow.
The long days at the Championship League fly by. They do.
Yeah.
That is mind-blowing. That is absolutely mind-blowing. I remember that programme with Phil Yates in the pub, and with Steve, wasn't it? Going back a long time.
It was at Steve's house.
Oh, Steve's house. Sorry, of course it was. And I must admit, I said it to Phil most time, and I think nearly every time he comes back with a story that he wasn't paid for it, or he's still got some unpaid checks or something.
Well, no, I know how much he got. It wasn't much. He did get paid, but it was. I'm guessing Steve got more. That's all I'll say.
Okay. But that is that Tipex line is wow. I don't like to be speechless, and no one likes to be speechless on a podcast. That's no good. It's effectively like the radio. Being speechless on the radio is rubbish. It's just dead air. But I'm nearly there.
I sense we might be winding up. But I hope if people are going on holiday, obviously they enjoy themselves. I did want to mention actually one non-snooker thing, and that's Ozzy Osbourne, because I'm here in Birmingham.
Yeah.
And there is a slight snooker connection to this. So John Bright Street is just about 5 minutes walk from here, and that's where the first World Championship final was staged. And the next street along is Navigation Street. And a month ago, they painted the wall. It's outside New Street Station here in Birmingham. They painted the wall with a Black Sabbath sort of mural. Sort of paintings of the four members, and they actually came because they did that gig a few weeks ago, the final performance at Aston Villa's ground. They grew up in Aston, and they came along and they signed, they signed the names, and now it's a shrine. You go down there and there's flowers being laid. There's Black Sabbath Bridge up at Brindley Place. I was up there last night, and they're laying flowers. The pub next door of Cotton Don, they're advertising an exclusive Black Sabbath IPA, so they're very, really touching tribute. But the best bit is there's a off license down the road. It's called Candy and Liquor, right? And the guy who runs it has clearly seen an opportunity to put a big picture of Ozzy in the window. Rest in peace. So I actually thought Ozzy Osbourne would find that quite amusing. It's an off license, Candy and Liquor. That's where you want to be memorialised. But the thing about the band, I mean, it's not necessarily my music, but it's incredible to think they invented a genre. And, they grew up in Aston post-war years, heavily industrialised part of the country, a noisy part of the country, humming with factories and machinery. So clearly that has influenced their musical style. And I met a couple of people last night. They actually, I think they literally come to Britain, to sort of when they heard the news. It's very genuine, that fandom. It's very genuine. It's like snooker fans. It's genuine. Nobody jumping on a bandwagon. People were really upset, and they were wanting to show their tribute to him. And I just thought it was kind of, it's nice to see someone like that. That's not sort of, it's not spun in any way. They're just doing it because they want to do it, and they that's something they feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that is my music. That's my sort of community as well. And I don't know how many other genres that you could pin down were launched by one specific group of people so clearly. And I've spent the days just reading every tribute I can to that from anyone involved in sort of metal community, and everyone is just sort of, the way they speak is just like, my life is the way it is because of these guys. I know the people, my friends are the friends they are, people's partners, their whole careers are can be traced back to those four guys from Aston, and especially Ozzy because he sort of led the way. And yeah, it was incredibly sad. But yeah, I mean, I mean, you can listen to bands that are out now. I was listening to a band called Castle Rat, who are a very good band, new band, young guys from New York City, female singer. They're incredible, and they sound so much like Black Sabbath. And it's just like these guys probably couldn't be more different from um, the situation that you just described, where they grew up in post-war Aston. But the influence is still so clear to hear. Give them a listen if anyone, they've got a new single out last week. Actually, it's very, very good. So yeah, just there's obviously like the celebrity side of Ozzy and all the mental daft stuff he did, and obviously the Osbournes was a whole different thing. But it shouldn't be forgotten his like incredible influence on music and people's lives for decades and decades. So yeah, glad you brought that up because I wanted to as well. And it's lovely seeing you're there, obviously in Birmingham. The whole city seems to be coming out in support. So yeah, no, big love to Ozzy and all the Sabbath guys.
Yeah, and where it is connected to snooker, it's a movement that has its roots in British working class life. It's a very much a working class thing. Snooker came from, in terms of how it became popular, from sort of mining leagues, steelworkers leagues, and just the volume of people from that background that played it. If you look at pretty much all the world champions from Britain, they've all come from that kind of background. You know, John Higgins, again, it's in Pots of Gold, last plug of this episode. He used to, because his dad worked on the oil rigs, they didn't have a lot of money, and it was £2 for an hour to play or something like that. And he would stand, he said, I would put my coat on, stand by the door with my cue, hoping that basically his mother had a couple of quid to give him, £4 for a couple of hours, whatever. That's the background they're from. And that was the background that Black Sabbath were from. And it's sort of, obviously two different movements, but, it's kind of same roots, I suppose.
I wanted to bring it up as well. So we were all like-minded on that one. And yeah, great son of Birmingham and Aston. You talk about quite a working class patch, really. I mean, I enjoy going there to see Villa. I love that ground, and of course, Ozzy had big connections with Villa as well. I noticed they put some messages out, and yeah, I'm sorry, Phil. I know how much you thought of Ozzy, and I said, I can't remember where it was now, which forum is on. You can't help how you're made, God or Mother Nature, but I'm not particularly a fan of vanilla and vanilla characters. I mean, Ozzy is probably the most opposite to vanilla I think any human being could ever be, really. He was a complete one-off. So, yeah, very sorry to lots of fans of Ozzy, people that I know in my life as well. So he was a huge influence. So obviously rest in peace, and condolences to all the to all his family and friends. Great clip of him and McCartney. I know you've seen that doing the rounds. Him meeting McCartney that I really like as well, and then sort of nattering away. That was always a bit special. But yeah, what memories, eh? And that last gig, I mean, it's sort of poignant to think, but we all know about last gigs from musicians and bands over the years, and they do last gigs for 20 years. It always the joke about Sinatra, isn't it? They kept coming back forever and ever. More comebacks than Sinatra and all that. But very poignantly, this really was a sort of last gig and a last performance, and it's just sad to think about. But yeah, he leaves behind such what a legacy.
Absolutely. Well, on that upbeat note, I'm going to go down to candy and liquor now and pay my respects. But one thing to say, because at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham 3 years ago, they had this big mechanical bull.
I love that.
Part of the opening ceremony. They moved it to Centenary Square, so it was on show. But then it's now in New Street Station, and they had a poll in Birmingham what to call it, and the winner was Ozzy. It's called Ozzy the Bull, which again I think he would appreciate as kind of a very sort of normal tribute in a way. But I guess that's it. Unless anyone else has got any other business. So Nick is raising his hand.
I have one thing to ask you. It crossed my mind. I thought this is probably the number one question I want to ask Dave Hendon. Actually, something that I haven't quite got cleared up. It's not connected with snooker. But it's something, and I often listen to pods late at night, might be a bit sleepy. And I thought, did I really hear Dave say this? I have to get it cleared up. Did Bryan Cranston really approach you when you had a Los Polos Hermanos t-shirt on and sort of look at you and point at it? And why do you not make more of that? Because
it was
if that happened to me, people would, I'd say little else.
Well, it was a big missed opportunity because, as you know, these days, if you don't photograph something, it didn't exist. It can't have happened. But I was at the National Theatre in London, there was a play called The Motive and the Cue. It was about John Gielgud directing Richard Burton in Hamlet. I'm going to say it was a Shakespeare thing. Anyway, that was what the play was about. But the interval was quite a long play. Mark Gatiss played John Gielgud. Terrific. Oh, nice. But anyway, in the interval, so you get like 15 minutes. We came out and I was just sat on my phone because that's what people do, and just waiting for the call to go back in. And I was wearing that T-shirt from the show, and I was aware that someone was sort of stood pointing, but I didn't look up because it was busy. There's lots of people, right? Anyway, and then he started walking away, and I looked up to see him walking away, and it was Bryan Cranston. Bryan Cranston was pointing at a T-shirt I was wearing from the most famous show he's been in, and I didn't clock it in time to shake his hand, get a picture, speak to him. And that in a way that's some sort of metaphor for something. I don't know what, but But the fact is, he did see it and he did point. I just didn't quite register in time.
Well, you said you're not a big salesman, I think, or some words to that effect recently. Self-promoter, and some people say that, and you sort of think, well, you are actually. But in your case, I'm going to accept that because you didn't make very much at all of Bryan Cranston.
I would have done had I got the picture. I would have done. But I like to think we're good friends now. But anyway,
we are wrapping up. I mean, just to say, of course, so much great sport going on. Scotty Scheffler won the Open Championship. England-Spain coming up. That's a familiar story, isn't it? In the final of Euro 2025. And, got to say, Shanghai Masters, big tournament with you, Dave, and the team on TNT Sports and Discovery Plus. Everyone's going to enjoy it. Lots of big players. Prestigious event. And we talk about snooker not being a summer thing. Well, it is now, but this is a big one.
It's a big one. They've made a crazy decision, I think, though. Whoever's made it, I'm guessing that the organisers, Ronnie and Jia Xingtong are on the same session on different tables. That seems completely avoidable. And clearly, I don't know which match we're going to show, but we're going to get stick either way, aren't we? You're not showing the world champion, or you're not showing Ronnie. Of course, you can watch it on Discovery Plus. You can watch both matches, so they are both available. That just seems avoidable. But anyway, it's a big month. Neil, Alan, myself, Phil Studd will be commentating, and then I will be going to Jeddah for the Saudi tournament. I went there last year for the pool. Very interesting place. They've got the world's tallest fountain, and that will be mentioned at some point. It's on the coast. It's very different to Riyadh. Riyadh is very busy. It's quite Western in terms of the traffic. Jeddah's a bit more relaxed, so we'll see. I don't know, obviously how well it's been promoted there in terms of crowds, but it's by one of the football stadiums, so it's certainly got more chance than I think the last year. And then Wuhan will be on TNT as well. So by the end of August, as you say, we've got 3 big titles handed out, and it feels like we're kind of off and running really properly in terms of the season. There's going to be some people's seasons will be defined by the next few weeks, actually.
When you say Wuhan, you mean Wigan, of course.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to see how much of a head start sort of those qualifiers in the Championship League gives some of those guys who played a lot, because there's some of the top players haven't picked up the cue yet. No, I think Mark Allen, because he's pulled out of Shanghai as well. His first game will be in Saudi, I think, all season. So some people will have a bit of a head start and could spring some surprises on.
It's true, although last year Trump didn't play Championship League and he won Shanghai, was runner-up in Xi'an and won Saudi. So, I know what you're saying, though. I think for some of the younger players, maybe like Ben Mertens, I mentioned earlier, some of the other guys, our team Zhuzhen, who we now know how to say his name. Those guys, it'd be great to see someone like that, like breakthrough. Anthony Kowalski or someone come and have a run in Saudi or something. It'd be fantastic. But, it's not as simple as that, is it? And by the way, Saudi, again, they'll have the same issue. The last 32 being played on the same day, Ronnie and Xingtong on the same session. With Ronnie's connections with Saudi, I'm guessing he's going to get the nod. And so people, I think, will rightly say, hang on, you've told us this is the new star, the world champion, we've got to promote him. It's an issue that is kind of hard to get round when it's a scheduling issue. And I'm sure people have plenty to say about it, and understandably, but TV can only show one match at a time. The other matches are streamed; you can watch them, but a linear channel can only show one match at a time. So I'm just saying that now to preempt what we're going to get next week.
Absolutely. Well, it's going to be great TV watching over the times to come, isn't it? And we just can't wait for it. The season's sort of really hotting up, and I think also, let's be clear, it's quite good scheduling in a way to have the quieter event, the Championship League, on when Wimbledon is on and the Open is on, and now a lot of these great summer events are coming to a close. It's a nice little window for snooker. It feels kind of like it'll fill that gap in a better way than when it's ultimately up against sort of behemoth sporting events, eh?
Yeah, can see that. Yeah, Premier League coming back, but other than that, we're all right.
There's always something, isn't there? But I've noticed, for example, I think the tournament in Xi'an, it's in October this year, but I think it actually ends on a Monday, which is, obviously the World Championship does in Britain. That's for bank holiday. I don't know the reason for that. It must be something, I guess, to do with the promoters, whatever. Maybe they feel, maybe it might be a national holiday there. I don't know. But so that's a bit different. And that will be on TNT as well. We normally get a sort of list of what's on. It came a bit later this year, but it's good to see that obviously the transition from Eurosport to TNT, they're still showing very much committed to snooker, and will be interesting. Obviously, Channel 5 later in the season, what happens there, how their coverage is. But there's plenty to watch. I suppose that's the bottom line. We're going to wrap up, so I'll just say, if anyone wants to contact my podcast, it's snookerscenepodcast@mail.com. snookerscenepodcast@mail.com. What offices can they find you at?
Well, they can find us at Talking Snooker at yahoo.com, or they can tweet us at Talking Snooker. We've got Liam Pullen on soon, haven't we, Phil? Really looking forward to that. Should be a smashing guest. We've had a lot of wonderful player guests this summer, and that's going to be the latest. So tune in to us very soon, and of course tune into the now 10-year-old decade Snooker Scene podcast with Dave Hendon. I talked about Corrie. You must be sort of aiming for what? At least sort of 25?
Well, let's start with 11 and see where we go from there. Well, listen, I mean, the game's going nowhere, so it's just a question of whether I am, I suppose. But listen, hopefully, I think these podcasts do contribute. And like you say, they're all different. They do contribute in their own way to the sort of the gaiety of the circuit, if that's the phrase I'm looking for. But we should wrap up, because we promised 19 minutes. It's gone on longer than that, obviously. But it's the first summer special. Let's hope it's not the last, and let's hope it's satisfied certainly Brian Campbell and his expectations, and anyone else listening. And well, I'm going to say goodbye. Bye. Obviously, you don't have to, but that might be an appropriate way to end. So, thanks to everybody for listening, I guess. And in 3, 2, 1, it is
goodbye.
Bye.
That nearly worked. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody, and we will see you in our respective homes, not our literal homes, our podcast homes, in due course.